thanks to Richard Lester, who started this movement back in the late 80s, when I was just a young lawyer. And I spoke to Richard just Lester last week. And fortunately, he's sharp, he's doing great. And a big thanks to him for starting this movement back in the late 80s. So I'm practicing now over 30 years. And I can tell you, because of my involvement in the motorcycling community, going back to well before I was a lawyer, I've had more than a passing interest in cases involving motorcycles. I'm a civil trial lawyer. I was elected president of the New York State Academy of Trial Lawyers, which is the largest state trial bar in the country. I've also tried more motorcycle accident cases than I believe any other attorney on the planet. I've done them in over 30 jurisdictions. But early on, I met Richard Lester, and he told me there's a way to give back to the community. And part of that was becoming a monitor of federal law enforcement and their actions against the motorcycle community. And there's a misconception, not just amongst riders, but amongst citizens in general. People have this misconception that if they're doing nothing wrong, they don't have to be concerned with law enforcement. But with empirical data and scientific facts, it's been proven that that's not true. With DNA evidence, we have found with a 99.9% certainty that some people are innocent, yet sentenced to spend their lives in jail. And of course, that is injustice. And as leaders in the motorcycle rights movement, and in your motorcycle clubs, and your motorcycle rights organizations, first of all, I salute all of you for being here, for learning. But that's not your complete job. Your complete job is to share the information. For your brother and sister riders. And I think some of this information is important. The average law enforcement officer gets legal training. Federal agents in the FBI and the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, gets a 6-week program on the law, including constitutional rights and what they can and can't do. That doesn't mean they don't try and go as far as they can to get prosecutions. That doesn't mean that that individual agent maybe didn't learn enough in those 6 weeks, or was under directives from their supervisor that they didn't understand, or maybe conscientiously disregarded and are infringing upon your rights, potentially to your detriment. One of the tools that has been used repeatedly against members of the motorcycle riding community is the Rico law. Rico stands for Racketeering, Influence, Corrupt Organization. It is sections 1961 to 1968 of the United States Code annotated. It used to be the federal government was limited, and laws were the types of designated crimes that anybody would know they were violating the law. They were limited to 4 specific federal crimes: treason, bribery, piracy, and counterfeiting. Today there's over 4,500 laws. One 9/11 law created 60 new federal crimes. Legal experts, law professors have stated that they believe that every single United States citizen is probably violating some federal law every single day without even knowing it. A lot of these items aren't murder, robbery, assault. Now, can be breaking business rules and public welfare offenses that make it easier to charge people with crimes. So in 1970, under Nixon's administration, they came up with the Rico law. And basically it was to bring down organized crime. But its use by prosecutors expanded. In 1984, Key West, a police department, was charged with Rico. In 1989, Michael Milliken, a businessman, was charged with Rico, and he was the only one. In his complaint, they used a racketeering, influence, corrupt organization charge against a single individual. So what is Rico? The government has to prove that it is the conduct of an enterprise engaged in racketeering. They have to prove. It's my ringtone. Sorry about that. They have to prove. I think it's Joe. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there's an enterprise operating across state lines, that there's a pattern of racketeering, and that the individual was part of that racketeering enterprise at least twice. So what's the definition of enterprise? I guarantee every one of you here in this room is part of an enterprise. RICO's vague criteria allows prosecutors to use membership in a motorcycle club as an enterprise. And your club can be engaged in an enterprise that is involved in illegal activity, even if only 1 or 2 members are engaged. Even if, and I've seen this in complaints repeatedly, people might no longer be in the club, they might have been prospects, they might have been just friends, hang-arounds. And legitimate clubs can be treated as criminal gangs. Evidence of interstate commerce. You need that. If you don't have that, you can't get the federal jurisdiction. A lot of states have enacted mini Rico statutes, where the state law mirrors the federal law. But don't kid yourself. The interstate aspect is easy to prove. First of all, we're all here. I came from New York. Boom. There we go. Interstate. You go on runs where you leave your state lines, interstate. Do you sell t-shirts on your website to people outside your state? Interstate. Is your website selling the t-shirts? Something that people can view from out of your state? Interstate. Do you process payment in means that aren't strictly cash? That clearinghouse, Zelle or money wires, PayPal, all interstate. And that doesn't mean, oh, so from now on, let's just do cash. No, money laundering. Online club merchandise can be turned into fraud allegations. Selling club gear, fundraising, can be a fraudulent interstate business activity if law enforcement wants to push a Rico case. What is racketeering? Racketeering is a laundry list of crimes. These are the predicate acts, and you need at least two of them. Now, things that you don't think are crimes, I read about in the complaints. I'll give you a for instance. Let's suppose you're a mechanic, and the girl up front that does the bills, she says, you know, Jim said some shit about you. He says you don't know how to change a muffler. And you go back and you say to your buddy, you know, Jim said I don't know how to change a muffler. And the other guy said, I heard he said I don't know how to change a spark plug. Let's go talk to him. And you go up to him with your friend and you say, Jim, why is it we hear you talking shit about us? And he says, I'm not saying anything. You say, all right, take your word for it. Just, you know, if you are, stop. Okay. Can anybody see something like that happen at their place of employment? Okay. Now, same shit happens. You hear somebody says, guys in your club were doing some shit. Anything. That you were like out of line at a bar, you sold bad drugs, whatever, make up some shit. Not true. Not true. Made up. And you and your buddy go over to somebody and say, hey, you talking about us? What's going on? If you are, stop. Same scenario. But now that incident shows up in a federal complaint as kidnapping. I've read the complaints. Girls at the door, two guys show up. They said, you said we did this, we didn't do it, she was scared. That's kidnapping. There's a vague violent crimes label where a single member can assault someone. Might be before they were even in the club. They can stretch stealing and cheating for ordinary fundraising or club dues. They can target poker runs or raffles as illegal gambling. Cash transactions can be characterized as money laundering. And guilt by association. One member is accused of a crime and they bring in the whole club. In law school, we learn about mens rea. In a crime, typically, you have to have an actus reus, or a criminal act, and a mens rea, which is criminal intent. For Rico, there is no mens rea requirement, meaning you don't even have to intend. You don't have to have a criminal intent to be convicted on Rico charges. Rico is a prosecutor's tool. It stacks the deck in favor of the prosecution. So picture a cop is selling drugs. Read the papers, it happens. They don't bring down the whole police department. No, don't even suggest it. Or a business has somebody selling drugs. A bar has somebody selling drugs. They don't bring down everybody working there. But with a motorcycle club, they'll arrest the whole club. And then they'll say, hey, Jim, we don't really want you. We know Bobby was the one that was selling. You cooperate, and we'll drop the Rico charges against you. They don't call it ratting. Cooperate. But the fact of the matter is, they know, even if you say, fuck you, I'm not cooperating, I don't know anything, you're going to talk to your buddy and say to him, Jim, listen, I got my wife, I got my kids, I didn't do this, you got to man up, you got to cop a plea, you got to end this thing. They can squeeze one member by arresting the whole club. With Rico, there's punishment before trial. Immediately after the charges are brought, they can seize assets as part of the fruit of the criminal enterprise. They can take your bikes, they can take your house, seize your bank accounts, and that's before you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's as soon as you take a pinch. As soon as you're arrested, they can seize all your shit. A lot of people think, well, new government, new leadership. No. They didn't stop. They didn't stop. You think because you're not an undocumented immigrant, they're not after you? Wrong. Here's the way it works. The FBI, federal law enforcement, is all over the United States. It's not just in New York. It's everywhere. It's the federal government. And part of their budget is gang related. And they don't want to give up that money. And for each department, you're on the gang list if you're in a motorcycle club. That's just the way it works. And if your boss was paying you to do something, whether it was worthwhile or not, you probably want to look busy. And that's the same thing with the feds. So here's some cases. These are all within the last year. Thug riders. 14 thug riders were indicted. They said that even though the indictment was in Ohio, they said the national leader was in New Jersey, and right in the complaint, as part of the alleged illegal activity, they say things that a lot of people think are pretty normal. They had regular meetings that they referred to as the church. Only full or patched thug rider motorcycle clubs are allowed to attend church. Members paid regular dues and fines. Only they call it the motorcycle gang. It's not a club anywhere. They paid the motorcycle gang. August of 24, 18 pagans in Missouri. 18 were indicted. 2 of them allegedly assaulted a rival motorcycle club 2 years earlier. 13 were charged with discharge of a firearm. I've never seen 13 people shoot a gun. Unless it's like, some big military hardware. But I don't think that's what happened here. North Carolina, October 24, 16 HAs and Red Devils in North Carolina. So, after that charter got busted, they checked their clubhouse and they found a bug. Not, a roach, like a listening device. And it was an old model, and it wasn't operating. So they called me up and said, asked me what I thought. And here's the way it works. The feds can get a listening device. They can get a warrant to put it in your clubhouse. All these cases, they're usually built with confidential informants. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes they'll get somebody right in the club. You've all heard the stories or read the books. Sometimes a club will be patched by, somebody's a piece of. But unless you know everybody going in your clubhouse every single day, you could have a bug in there. Now the thing is, they're only allowed to use it typically during a statutory period, a certain amount of time. But when that's over, they don't have to go and pick it up. They can leave it there and it can sit there for years. Or they can get a new warrant and see if they can turn it back on. Banditos, February 2025. So, the common thing in all these cases, yeah, some of them there allegations of murder, attempted murder. But what's interesting is, those acts are called the predicate acts. They go back in time. They go back in time. So like, attempted murder, back in 2022. So you gotta think, why is it there was an attempted murder in 2022 and they don't make any arrests, and then it becomes part of a Rico indictment 2 years later? The reason is they didn't have enough proof. The prosecutor looked at their investigation and said, we don't have enough to indict anyone, to bring it before a grand jury, to press charges. We can't make arrests, you don't have enough proof. But then a couple years later, with a couple other acts or something going on, they say, no, we'll throw it in there as part of the indictment. There was a case up in Rochester where a Rico indictment came down. Part of it was like one guy stealing metal from railroad tracks. And in the indictment, one of the predicate acts was 10 years earlier. Apparently, somebody was in a bar and was saying bad things about this motorcycle club. The bartender liked the motorcycle club, called up the club. One of the members came to the bar, beat up the guy that was saying bad things, and then they took this surveillance video from the cameras. Why did that show up in the indictment 10 years later? Because 10 years is the statute of limitations on the Rico predicate acts. It's got to be within 10 years. So 10 years later, they got something going on, and they say, well, that happened 10 years ago. We didn't do anything with that. Well, that'll be one of our predicate acts to get in Rico. That way we can bust the whole charter, and we use it as a prosecutorial tool. And it's a lot easier when you bring in 14 scary guys into court in the same case than just having one guy there. And they could put pressure on these people to cop pleas. So the consequence of RICO charges: guilty verdicts result in sentences of up to 20 years per count and fines up to $25,000. Seizure of all the assets before conviction. This prevents the organization from liquidating the racketeering enterprise prior to a guilty conviction. So how do you protect yourself? First of all, you got to know your rights. To calmly assert your rights is very difficult. It's not easy. I remember one time I was in court and I had my laptop out and a court officer comes up to me, and there was a bunch of lawyers around, you're all waiting to have our case called, and the court officer says to me, "What are you doing? That laptop has a camera. You know you're not supposed to have a camera in court." And I was like, sorry. And I tried to turn off the thing and I couldn't, and he's like, "What are you doing? You gotta turn that." I got nervous. My heart started going. He fucked me up. And it was just over a camera in court. When your adrenaline starts going, it's hard. It's hard to stay cool. But you gotta do your best. It's against a lot of our natures. But, and you might watch YouTube videos where people assert their rights and they're snotty with the cops and the cops look stupid. I like them, but I think you're better off trying to take a deep breath and smile. It's not, you'll piss them off just as much as you would by yelling at them. Just smile. "Good afternoon, officer, how can I help?" Because nowadays, they're running videos. Most of them are supposed to, not all of them do. Criminal cases get more expensive to hire a lawyer. I don't think if you call me up, I'm going to do this for free. I don't do this. That's not what I do. This I do for free. But if you get a criminal lawyer, I'm a civil lawyer, not criminal. I'm civil. I do civil cases. But if you get a criminal lawyer, you got to pay by the hour. And the thing is, if there's 8 cops that show up, 8 cops are going to have different videos. And your lawyer's going to be charge you by the hour to look at all those different videos. Because that's their job, because who knows what one camera might pick up. But if you're there smiling, if your case is going to go to trial, a jury might look more favorably on you. You look like a nicer person. Nobody says, "Oh, I like that guy. He's such an angry guy." No, I like that guy. He's a nice guy. Protect your motorcycle club. When you're attending a COC meeting, the primary purpose should be discussing your civil rights. You should teach each and every individual that's attending. What are we here for? What's the primary purpose? To discuss our civil rights. Issues between clubs that are in the organization can be discussed. We should have our anniversaries on the same weekend. We'll go to your party, you come to ours, whatever. That's fine. Issues between clubs. You guys are wearing, this. And if somebody wants to join, you could discuss. If they join, they got to change their patch. It looks too much like ours. That's fine. But don't discuss controlling people that are not in your organization. So like the Shriners, they could say, if you want to be a Shriner, you got to wear a funny hat and ride around a golf cart. But they can't say, and let's make sure everybody that goes to that supermarket wears a funny hat too. If they're in the organization, you can tell them what to do. If they're outside, that shouldn't be what your COC is set up to do. Any disputes with other clubs that are not members of your COC should not be discussed. If possible, have an attorney there to monitor the discussions. An attorney is an officer of the court and can be a witness to testify as to the legitimacy of the conduct and discourse. But if you're asking your attorney to leave the room, you're defeating the purpose. You're basically saying, step outside for a moment. We need to talk about stupid shit that we shouldn't be talking about in a public forum. Now's the part where you leave the room so we can discuss things that can get us indicted. Because that's what we like. We want to miss time from work and our families and get paraded in the newspapers because we can't figure out a way to say our shit in public without talking about shit that we know sounds sketchy. Like most civil trial attorneys, I prepare witnesses. I prepare witnesses all the time. I might spend a day just trying to get someone to introduce their education and work experience, which is the answer to one question, but that's how they're introducing themselves. It's important. And I spend just a whole day working on them with that. Sometimes it goes more than one day. There are ways you can say things differently and not get yourself in trouble. Think. Never discuss publicly the controlling of territory. It's a bad idea to discuss whether someone's out good or bad. Keeping minutes is a good idea, especially if you have somebody like me show up at your meetings and I can give a speech on civil rights. Rules when encountering the police. Always be calm and polite. You might be profiled. You probably are. But don't be hostile. You might think the cops aren't going to respect my rights anyway. Yeah, on occasion that's true. But law books are filled with cases where charges were dismissed or people were set free from jail on appeal just because the cops didn't respect someone's constitutional rights. So a calm assertion of your rights in a friendly manner, if you can muster that, is your best conduct. If you're being stopped on your bike or your car, pull over immediately. Now, a lot of times people say, wait a minute. Suppose it's dark on a rural road, and I don't trust the cops. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to go to a well-lit area. If you can, you got to weigh it out. Whether you're going to dig yourself in a deeper hole by disregarding a directive to pull over, and perhaps get increased charges against you. But the best idea is typically to pull over immediately. Turn your car, your bike off, but keep your hands on your handlebars or the steering wheel. Ask the officer the question. Good afternoon, officer. Why'd you pull me over? Typically, they say to you, do you know why I pulled you over? And you might think, oh, if I sound like I'm a good guy, then you'll let me go. Yeah, I know I was going a little bit too fast. My wife just came home from getting her breast done. I don't know. Anyway, it's not going to help you out to talk your way out of it. Don't think you're going to talk your way out of it. When we were kids, we thought, oh, Nelson's so cool, he could talk his way out of anything. That's stupid. If they have enough grounds to arrest you, they can and probably will, unless they're building a case to arrest your buddy. If they don't have anything against you, they're supposed to let you go. You've all heard the term illegal search and seizure. When you're stopped on the highway under the Constitution, that is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. Refuse the search. If they ask, if they don't ask, you can say in a loud and clear voice, I do not consent to this search. There's a very important phrase. Am I being detained? Once you express your desire that you want to leave, the law recognizes the obligations of law enforcement change. Am I being detained or am I free to go? If I'm not being detained, I want to go. Don't think you had to stay there just because he came asking you questions. You can interrupt the questioning and say, I'm going to answer everybody's questions at the end. Let me finish up and then I'll take any questions. You can say, am I being detained or am I free to go? Yeah, I see that you're the president of the motorcycle club. What does that mean? Am I being detained or am I free to go? I just want to ask you some questions. I understand. Am I being detained or am I free? You have to give me a license. If you're operating a motor vehicle, you got to give me a license. And registration. And in some states, insurance. Some states, believe it or not, do not require insurance. That's a state-by-state rule. You got to give it to them. If you're walking down the street, probably don't have to give them your identification, bless you. Of course, being arrested. But operating a motor vehicle, you got to give me a license. You don't need to complain about the ticket on the side of the road. You can fight it in court. You're not going to get it thrown out on the side of the road. The United States Supreme Court, the highest law in the land, has determined that police officers have the right to lie to you. So it's perfectly legal and permitted for a police officer to say to you, we heard from your brother Dave that you robbed that liquor store. Dave told us you did it. We just want to know who was there with you. might not have said anything to them. They can make it up. They can lie to you. Don't consent to a search. You have the right to clearly express your refusal to the search, but only verbally refuse. Don't physically fight the search. Now, their rights to search you can be slippery. He kept his helmet on, so I couldn't identify him. And based upon his conduct, I feared my safety, so I had to search him. He took his helmet off, so it could be used as a weapon. And based upon his conduct, I feared for my safety, so I had to search him. Whatever your condition, don't run from the police. Stand your ground, calmly assert your rights, don't resist them, write everything down about the incident, and you can file a police misconduct report immediately afterwards. Thank you. Any questions? Sir?
On the being detained,